Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to resume in Perek Gimel here, and we started Perek Gimel last week, just the general concept of the story of Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they were threatened to bow down to this idol, or this statue, we should say, not an idol, a statue of Nebuchadnezzar. So we're going to start, we gave the general background to that. We're going to start on Pasuk Ches. We're going to start reading in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Ches, just to go through some of the selected psukim here, and then really spend hopefully a sufficient amount of time dealing with this question of giving up their life in face of being threatened to bow down. So Perek Gimel, Pasuk Ches begins, Kol Kavel Dina. So Nebuchadnezzar has set up this, issued this decree that there's going to be a lot of music played. And at the time when all this music is played, everyone at that point is supposed to bow down to this big golden statue, which he has made. We said last week there are two reasons suggested for the making of the statue. Either one, Rav Saadia Gaon says he is intending to try to lure the Jews in and get them to bow down to it. And by doing that, maybe we'll reverse the ill effects of the dream.
So he did it solely, not just for like North Korea here, they make them bow down and stuff like that.
And what's that about?
So that's, but there's no Jews there, so that's just they're vain and they want complete control.
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. One suggestion made by Rav Saadia Gaon is that he's doing it to try to lure the Jews in. There's a few other suggestions, and I want to touch on that. In North Korea, when they do it, are they like deifying themselves? And everyone should acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. But do they see saying they're the greatest thing ever? Is it that they believe that they actually are like a god? I mean, many of these people are atheists.
Yeah,
So
they themselves know basically. The Kim Dynasty knows that's total.
they know. Okay.
But like, they're just trying to get their power.
They want their power. Okay, good. So.
He wants to sweep basketball players.
Okay, so I'll be honest. I don't. After preparing, I can't say I'm 100% clear on all the details here, but I hope that through together learning some of the Ma'ir Makomos, we'll be able to try to come up with some of and try to get some clarity on some of these issues. So Nebuchadnezzar makes a statue and he says everyone's going to have to do this. And Pasuk Ches says that while everyone is doing this, music plays, everyone is down, and at that time there are these people around who come and they slander on the Jewish people. And Pasuk Tes, they say to him, Ano ve'amrin l'Nebuchadnezzar malka, malka la'olmin chaye, right? The king who should live forever. We'd like to tell you something. Pasuk Yud, Ant malka, you the king, samta te'em, you made a law, dikol enash diyishma, kol karna mashrokisa, kastro, savcha, psanterin, v'supunya. They list all these types of musical instruments. You made a law. Everyone who hears the musical instruments, Yipel v'yizgud, will fall and bow. Let's sell him dahava to the golden statue. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Uman de la Yipel v'yizgud, and whoever doesn't do that, Yisrim elagoyatun nuraya kidata. Remember Nebuchadnezzar? That's the rule that you made. So now here's the punchline. Isai guvrin Yehudain, Pasuk Yud Beis. There are these Jewish people. Dimanisa yashon alavidas medinas Bavel, who you appointed in some kind of official position in Bavel, and they are Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Guvraya ilech lo samu alach malka teim. They are paying no interest to your rule. Leilahach la palchin, to your gods they will not bow. Uletzelem dahava, and to your golden statue dihakemta that you established la sagdin, they will not be bowing. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Beidayan, at that time, then, Nebuchadnezzar birgaz v'chama. He gets, he's raging in anger. Amar, he says, Lahaisa l'sharach meshach Abednego, to bring them. Beidayan guvraya ilech hesayu kadam malka, and at that time, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah are brought to Nebuchadnezzar. Pasuk Yud Daled. So Nebuchadnezzar says to them, Ane Nebuchadnezzar, B'amar lahom, Hatzda, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Is it true what I hear? Leilahi la, Isechon palchin. You will not bow down to my gods. Ulatselem dahava dihakemes la sagdom. You're not going along with the plan. Ka'an, hein isechon asidin, di v'idana di tishma'un, and then he lists off all the instruments. He says in Pasuk Tesvav, he says essentially, I'm going to give you another chance. Don't you know what the rule is? So it already happened. He's actually giving them another chance to follow through. And he says, don't you know, when you hear the music, everyone down, you know the routine. And if you don't, I'm going to throw you into this furnace alive. Pasuk Tes Zion, now we'll read this one inside. Ano Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, v'amr l'malka Nebuchadnezzar, they say, Nebuchadnezzar, lo chashchin anachna adona piskam lahasavusach. We really are not concerned and to feel no need to respond to your requests, Nebuchadnezzar. Hein Isai, Elohana di anachna palchin, we believe that the God that we worship, Yachil l'shezavusana, he is able to save us. Min atun nura yakidata min yadach malkal yesheziv. He will save us from that furnace that you've made and from your hand. And now they say something interesting. Vehain la, and just know the following thing. In the event that our God does not save us, Yedia lahave lach malka, you should just know the following. Di lahach la itana palchin. We still will not give, and they say we will not worship your gods. I think it means we don't give credence to your gods. We'll tell them dahava diakim tolan is good. Meaning, we refuse to do this. And even if our God doesn't seem to pull through, so to speak, and perform some kind of miracle for us, that's not changing the way we feel about things. So Pasuk Yud Tes, Beidayan, at that time, Nebuchadnezzar, Hismeli Chema, fills up with rage. Utzleiman po yishtani, and his face is turning colors. Al Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Aneva Amar, Lemeze la'atuna, Chad Shiva, Al Di Chazeh Lemezia. He tells the people, folks, turn up the ovens. Make the ovens 7 times as hot as they normally are. Ula Guvrin Gibare Chayil and Pasuk Chaf, and to these powerful men, Diva Chayle, Amar lekapata, he told his men, his workers, to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, lemirme la'atun nura yakidata, and to throw them into this fire. Beidayan, then, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Guvraya ilech kefitu b'sar balehon, patashehon b'char balason ulevushehon. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are tied up in their clothing, which some Mefarshim say is an indication of Nebuchadnezzar's haste to get this done with, right? And he does not strip them down. He just quick, tie them up, throw them in. Some Mefarshim say that this was Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah saying, we will not be demeaned. And we will go in with our clothing. You will, if we're going to go down respectable, but you're not going to demean us as we go in. And Urimiv, to throw them, Lagoy Atu Nura Yakidata, into the fire. Okay. Pasuk Chaf Beis, just a few more psukim inside, and then we'll start to see the sources. Kol kavel dina, min dilas malka machzefa ve'atuna eza yatira. Nebuchadnezzar is very pushing to get this done with and to heat up the oven. Guvraya ilech dihasiku l'shadrach meshach Abednego katil himon shaviva dinura. The people who were told to throw them into the fire actually ended up being burned and seemingly died by the fire. That's how hot the fire was. Okay, so they're being told they're the workers, and boom, down they go. And Pasuk Chaf Gimel, I won't read inside. They throw Hanani, Mishael, Azariah in. Okay, Pasuk Chaf Daled. Edai Nebuchadnezzar Malka Teva v'kam b'hisbahala. So they're in the fire, and he gets up, and he's amazed. Aneva Amar lahadavroi. He says to the people who are around there, wait a minute. Hala guvrun tilasa remain legoy nura mechatefin. How many people did we throw into the fire? 3. Anayin v'amir l'malka yatzivu malka. They said, yeah, that's correct. We threw 3 in. Pasuk Chafei. Aneva Amar. So Nebuchadnezzar continues, and he says, Ha'ano chazei guvrin arba'a. I see that there are 4 people in the fire. Shirayin mahalchin b'goy nura, walking around in there. V'chaval lo isai behon. Chaval is like chavala, right? like no injury, nothing's happening to them. V'reve di revi'ah dameh lebar Elohim. And the appearance of this fourth one appears to me like bar Elohim literally means like a son of God or perhaps like an angel. Okay. So essentially, the next few psukim towards the end, Nebuchadnezzar calls that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego should be pulled out of the fire. And they come out untouched, and the fourth being is not there. And Nebuchadnezzar basically says, similar to what he says at the end of Perek Beis, after Daniel helps him out, right? He says, oh my gosh, praise is the God of the Jewish people, right? Incredible, tremendous God. And he says in Pasuk Chavtes, I'm going to make a rule, right? Any person who says anything negative or not good against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what will happen? Sound familiar? He says, we'll chop them into pieces and knock down their houses, right? That's like his go-to, threat, apparently, right? And he says, what God could have done such a thing if not for the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Okay. So lots to discuss here. So one point, I don't know if it was Ariel last week brought it up, and Aaron Leib had a point on this about, I was thinking about this, and it comes up again here. We see this like tremendous switch, right? Like he's like praising Hashem, and then boom, it's like bow down to my idol, and if not, chopped. When I hear it, not chopped down, he says burn you alive, and like what's going on? So I was thinking about it, and the thought dawned on me. I didn't see this anywhere, but especially the concept I think is true in a certain sense, at least, that all of the protagonists or the positive characters in Tanakh, I think we believe are embody some kind of positive traits and character and type of life that we're supposed to pull from. And they embody that in like the highest way, and we are probably supposed to in some way pull from that and apply that to our lives. And I think the antagonists, so it's not just that they're out to get us, but it's that like there's a little bit of antagonist in every one of us. So like there's something about Pyro that like there's like a part of us that's like a Pyro that we have to rid, and in Nebuchadnezzar. So I was thinking of it, and again, I don't know if this is a pshat, but I think the concept definitely rings true, and I could relate to it, is that, we all get religiously turned on at certain points, or people get religiously, inspired by things. But what happens? So we get inspired, but if it's not a real, maybe sometimes even if it is a real inspiration, but often when it's not like a real inspiration, it dies down. And sometimes even when it is a real inspiration, it dies down, and then a week later, a few days later, we're just back to our regular selves. And perhaps that's an element of the Nebuchadnezzar here, right? You see, he's very quick. He's got to get them in the fire now. Quick, put the clothes on, do it, get it done. So, in the moment, so he's firing. Wow, that's incredible. He's so impressed. This is awesome. It's incredible. But it doesn't seem to have kiyum. It doesn't seem to take him anywhere, because when things then are not going his way, so that all's dropped. There's nothing really holding on to that. It's just he's back to his good old self. And I think that we definitely have that issue to kind of sort out in ourselves, to hold on to the spiritual inspiration and have that carry. And even when things don't feel maybe right or stale, not to just flip and then turn the other way. Okay. So lots and lots of stuff here to discuss. Okay, so let's deal really with the first issue, which is the main issue, and it's on the Mareh Makom sheet. We said last week that there's a question about what exactly is the deal with this statue. Is the statue Avodah Zarah, or is it something else? And someone brought up here, even if it's something else, maybe even if he's just trying to get people to pay respect to him, maybe that is a form of Avodah Zarah too. So there are a few, really, there are three core Gemaras that kind of spin on this issue, and they are the background for a big piece of this topic, which is giving up your life for the sake of Hashem, and when being faced with this kind of challenge. So let's take a look at some of the Meforshim here. I made a chart to try to sort it out in the back, but it's really that all the topics kind of spin on these three main Gemaras. So let's take a look at the first Gemara is in Pesachim, Daf Nun Gimel. Those of us in Nafyomi had this a few months ago. So the Gemara says in source Aleph, Ma ra'u Chananya, Mishael, ve'Azariah, shemasru atzman al kedushas Hashem. What is it that they saw that inspired them to give up their lives for Kiddush Hashem? L'kiv shan ha'esh, to jump into the fire. So the Gemara says, Nasu kal v'chomer ba'atzman. They made a kal v'chomer mit sephardim, from the frogs. And what did they say? Umat sephardim, she'em mitzuvin al kedushas Hashem. The frogs are animals, they have no mitzvos. And yet, kesiv behu, it says, uva'u va'alu b'veisecha. And then it continues. It says, it says the frogs went into their homes, it went into their rooms, it went into their, and then it says, and it went into uvisanu recha, and it went into their ovens. So the Gemara says, Emasai misharos mitsuyos eitzel tanor. When are these misharos? I'm not even sure what that is. Is misharos like the bread or something like that? I don't even know. Yeah, it's like a kneading bowl. That's what it is. I think it's a kneading bowl. So when are the kneading bowls by the oven? Have omer b'shasha tanor cham. It's when the oven is hot and you're getting ready to bake bread. So what happened? They jumped into the ovens, but it's not that they just jumped into the oven. They jumped into the ovens. They deduced when the ovens were burning hot. If we are commanded to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, certainly we should go into an oven. If the frogs jumped into an oven for the sake of God, so too we should. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. So Tosfos here asks a basic question. And he says, okay, so how did they arrive at this conclusion that they should jump into the fire? How'd they do that? They said, oh, well, the frogs went into the fire, we should go into the fire. So Tosfos said, well, wait a minute. Why are we learning things from frogs? He said, there's a basic other principle, more straightforward. Why did they jump into the fire? Because what were they being told to do? To worship Avodah Zarah at the threat of their life. And we know that if you're threatened with your life and you have to do Avodah Zarah, so we say, Yarek Val Yahweh. So the Gemara says, why did they go into the oven? Because they saw the frogs did it, so we should do it. Why did they go into the oven? The answer should be very simply. They went into the oven because their life was in danger, and that's what you have to do if you're being faced with idol worship or going to an oven. So to that, in source base, Tosfos in Pesachim, which is Rabbeinu Tam, the famous grandson of Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam says, Selem zesh asa Nebuchadnezzar, the statue that he built, lav avodah zarah hava. It was not avodah zarah. It was not to worship anything. It wasn't to deify himself. It wasn't to bow down to it wasn't to worship the statue. Ella in darta sha'asa lichlod atzmo. It was a statue that he made for his own, publicity and his own honor. But it wasn't to worship him as a god. And he says, therefore, it wasn't avodah zarah at stake. So why did they give up their lives then? They didn't have to do this. So that's the point. The point the Gemara is saying is, even though it wasn't really avodah zarah, they said, this is a principle that we're not doing. And we are going to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. And how do we know we should be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim? Look, even these frogs were Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. We too, we're people. We could be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. We could bow down. There's nothing wrong with it. We don't have to give up our lives for this. But we're going to go the extra mile. We're going to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, and we're going to show that we're not giving you any type of kavod. Even though you're not saying you're a god, we're not giving you kavod. Okay. Now Tosfos actually says that this is somewhat meduyak in the psukim, because if you look in pasuk Yud Beis that we read. It's in pasuk Yud Beis and Yud Dalet. Yud Beis is when they're being told, when the people slandering on them tell Nebuchadnezzar, and Yud Dalet is Nebuchadnezzar repeating it. Notice how they say Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What do they say to him? They say they're ignoring your rule, dear king, and then they say two things: Le'lohach la palchin, to your gods they do not worship. Uletzelem dahava, and to the golden statue, dihakem talah sagdin, they won't bow to that. So Tosfos says the pasuk seems to divide it into two issues. They're saying to Nebuchadnezzar, look, they don't buy into your whole religion thing. So meaning they would not worship your gods. And with regards to this specific issue of your statue, they're not even doing that either. So Tosfos' point is that the threat was not a threat of worship avodah zarah, we kill you. It was give kavod to Nebuchadnezzar. And they said, we're not doing it. Now, that being said, there is a major conclusion to be drawn from here. And Ari brought this up a few weeks ago, which is a person apparently can make a decision even when the rule is not ye hareg va'al ya'avur, you must give up your life, because Tosfos is saying they didn't have to give up their life. A person may apparently make a decision to say, This is not a line that I crossed. We touched on this a little bit with Daniel in terms of the eating. Although there, again, we said that was it's a little tricky there because someone could say, well, that's what he was doing. And other people say, no, he was really eating avodah zarah food and that's why he was doing it. And other people say, he wasn't really putting his life on the line because who says you die after that many days? You know, he was still eating food. It's just he was malnutrition. Here, they clearly were going to die. So the conclusion that many bring from Tosfos is that Tosfos feels at least, that one can make that decision and say, this is a line I'm not crossing, and to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, I'm going to say, I don't bow even to the North Korean guy, even if it's not God, even if he doesn't not trying to deify himself, that's not what I do, and I'll even do that even at the expense of death. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's going to be the Rambam is going to talk about that, right? So let's jump right to that actually, because Ariel pointed out. So Ariel, for those of you on Zoom, Ariel asked a great question. He said, "Isn't this a Shas Hashmad? Right? This is a time of religious persecution." So, so that's a great point. It seems to be somewhat vague from the story, right? Because again, if he just wants everyone to bow down because to show that he's the king, so maybe that doesn't indicate that there's a Shas Hashmad. Maybe we just think in general, well, if they're living under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, there must be pretty bad things going on. But again, if we believe that the statue is just a statue for his kavod, that itself doesn't necessarily indicate that there's a Shas Hashmad. Okay, so that's the part that's a little bit we're going to see in the Rambam. That part is so that's the part I guess that I don't have so clear is what are the very fine details that make something Shas Hashmad. Like, does it have to be that they're gunning down? See, I always thought the Shas Hashmad was the foreign authorities are gunning down religion. That's how I assumed it was like, right? We're out to undo the religion. That's what it is. We don't want anyone keeping the religion. Here, you can say like, well, he's not saying that. He's saying, oh, keep Shabbos, keep kosher. That's fine. Do your religion. That's fine. But would you just show a little respect to my big statue in Town Square, right? Like, so I don't. It's not clear to me. Or if you say like, no, he's saying like everyone better do this or off with your head. So even though he's not gunning down the religion, he's clearly trying to like force everyone into this like very like nationalistic type of mind frame, which is like not healthy. And I don't know if that's just I don't know. So let's take a look at the Rambam though, based on what Ariel brought up. So the Rambam is on the second side of the Mar Makomos, and the Rambam says in Zion. So the Rambam points out, I think he says, "V'chol hadvarim ha'elu shelo b'shas ha'gezera." The Rambam's talking there in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah about the concept of giving up your life for Hashem. And he says, all of the things, he says basically, that you must give up your life for the big three, Gilui Arayos, Shfichus Damim, and Avodah Zarah. Avo, b'shas ha'gezera, if it is a time of decree, v'hu, and what is this? Sheyamod melech rasha ki Nebuchadnezzar v'chaverav, that a king who is wicked, like Nebuchadnezzar and his comrades, v'yigzer gezerah al Yisrael, and they make a gezerah on the Jewish people, levatel dasam o mitzvah min hamitzvos. What is a Shas Hashmad? They make a decree either to do one of two things, to try to, again, undo the religion, levatel dasam, it sounds like mitzvah min hamitzvos, or just to try to undo some of the undo a specific mitzvah. We are gunning down Shabbos. That's it. Jews will not do Shabbos. The religion? No, we're not gunning down religion. Away with Shabbos. So that would be Shas Hashmad as well. So he says in that case, Yehareg v'al yavor, one must give up their life. Afilu al achas mishar mitzvos, even on any kind of mitzvah. Bein ne'enas b'soch hasara, whether this is public, bein ne'enas beino levein ovdei kochavim, or whether it was something in private. If this is Shas Hashmad, you must give up your life. And now he says in the following halacha, v'chol mi shene'emar bo, and regarding any person who is obligated, Yehareg v'al yavor, to give up their life and not violate the Avera, v'neharag v'lo avar, and they go through with it, harei zeh kidesh es Hashem, they are mekadesh shem shemayim. And now what does he say? V'im haya ba'asara mi Yisrael, and if it is done publicly with 10 people around, harei zeh kidesh es Hashem barabim, it's even bigger. So there's one thing of being mekadesh shem shemayim, and one is mekadesh shem shemayim in public with 10 Jews around, like who? Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, v'chaverav. Like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, who did what they did. Now, I'll point out, we'll get to this in a moment, Daniel, notice, was absent from the story, right? Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, this is really going to be it. They're off the stage. They're only mentioned in the Sefer. Besides the story, they're always mentioned with Daniel. This is the one where they're center stage. This was their thing, which the Barbanel is going to say that's why it's here, because this is why this parak is here. This is the point at which they were Mekadeshim Shemayim. So the Rambam says that like Ariel said, this is a Shas Hashmad. And he says, therefore, he doesn't get into whether it was Avodah Zarah or not, but he says Shas Hashmad, which makes it sound like it really indeed was not Avodah Zarah. It was not Avodah Zarah. It was Shas Hashmad, which is why they had to do this. And what did they do? They were Mekadeshim Shemayim, and he says, like Chanani Mishal Bazar. So the obvious question then is, so what about the rest of the Jews? Right? The Rambam seems to say, were there other Jews there who were not bowing? Were there other Jews who were bowing incorrectly? What does he believe? Okay, so where was Daniel? Daniel's absent, and the Rambam says that they did this. How? They did it amongst 10 other Jews. It was Barabban. So the Rambam sees, again, a lot of these details are not here. The Rambam sees the story as other Jews are giving in. And Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah say, nope, we're not giving in. It's not Avodah Zarah. It's just some kind of thing that the king wants us to do. But it's Shas Hashmad, and therefore we're not doing it. And they're Mekadeshim Shemayim. And the other Jews do it. Now, there's a medrash which I quoted. I wanted to look it up inside. The medrash in number Ches and Shir Ashir and Rabbah, I didn't put it on the sheet, but apparently it's a machlokas. That some opinions in the medrash felt that there were other Jews around and they were the only Jews who didn't do it. And there were some opinions who said that, no, the story is focusing on them. And what happened was that there were no other Jews around. And they were the three who said, we're not doing it. It's just them. Okay, so that part is a little bit unclear also. Fine. Where is Daniel this whole time? What's going on with Daniel? So there is a possibility that Daniel is somewhere here. Right? Where might Daniel be? Okay, because Ari says, right, Daniel might be the fourth person, right? He might be that angel-looking person. So I think there are some opinions who actually say that the fourth one is Daniel. Let's kind of take a moment to deal with the Daniel issue, and then we'll come back to the Avodah Zarah issue, if that's okay. That won't be too confusing. We'll deal with Daniel, and then we'll come back to this question about whether they should have given up their lives or not. So let's look at Gimel. Go back to Gimel, source Gimel. And the Gemara says something very interesting. Shlosha hayu ba'osa etza. There were 3 people involved in this plan, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, regarding this event in Perek Gimel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not people. There were 3 who were involved. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, Daniel, and Nebuchadnezzar. So the Gemara says, number 1, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar, Hashem said, Nezel Daniel mehacha, get Daniel out of here. Delo lamru, so people don't say, B'zechu say, it's natzel. If Daniel is there, everyone will just say, Chanani, Mishael, Azariah weren't so great. And the only reason they were saved was because was on the toes of Daniel. So Hashem says, I bedavka don't want Daniel around. The only people who will be put to the test is Chanani, Mishael, Azariah, and that will be a public declaration of their greatness and commitment to Hashem. So where's Nebuchadnezzar? I don't know. Daniel said, Ezel mehacha, I will leave the scene. Why? Delo lekayim bi, so that they don't fulfill with me the pasuk Pesile Elohehem Tisrafun Ba'esh. The pasuk says in the Torah to burn the idols of idolaters in fire. So Daniel says about himself, what happened to me? After he was so impressed with me, right? What did he do? He gave him a name. His name was Belteshazzar, which the Mefarshim said Belteshazzar was the name of their idol, right? So they deified him. So he said, oh, I'm not going in the fire because I am, so to speak, their deity. Pesile Elohem, Tisrafun Ba'esh. I'm not getting near fire. Third one is Nebuchadnezzar Amar. Nebuchadnezzar said, Yezel Daniel mehacha, get Daniel out of here. Delo lemru kalye leilake benura. So they won't say that he burned his God in fire. Similar kind of concept. But the point is, the Gemara is saying Daniel is absent, and it's planned by a party of 3, by Hashem, Daniel, and Nebuchadnezzar, all here that Daniel is absent from this picture. The Ibn Ezra says very simply, he says that Daniel wasn't there because he obviously didn't bow. The Gemara makes it sound like Daniel's like not around almost. Ibn Ezra says in Pasuk Yud Beis, he says, they just didn't rat on Daniel. Why wouldn't they rat on him? Yeah, they're scared of him because he's the God. right? So it's like, the four kids in class doing something wrong, but the teacher's pet doesn't get ratted on. So, he's good. So he says that, the three of them, they had no problem to throw under the bus, but Daniel, they didn't want to do anything about it. Okay. So again, so Daniel, some Farshim say maybe he's in the fire. The Gemara doesn't seem to believe that. We're going to see in a moment. The Gemara says Daniel's absent. So either he's absent, like he's been like removed from the scene in advance, somehow through Hashem's, desire, or like the Menev says he's there and they just don't want to tell on him. So who is the one in the fire? So the Gemara says something interesting here in Pesachim, and it's in source Daled. It's in source Daled. It's a Gemara also more recently in Daf Yomi towards the end of Pesachim. And there's two Gemaras back to back, and they're both fascinating. One I put on, one I didn't. So I'm going to read the other one first, if I can find it. And yeah, so the first Gemara says as follows. Now, if I were to ask you, it's interesting. What other Tanakh story does this kind of bring us back to when we hear about someone in a fire? Right, someone's being thrown in a fire is Abraham. Okay, so very good. So Aaron Lane says that's a medrash. So it's very interesting, by the way. That is a medrash, right? I still remember I had a friend of mine who was very, very knowledgeable, very learned. And he was just saying, funny, I think we've all had a similar experience at some point. I had it with other examples of Tanakh. He said he still remembers when he was like older, and he was a grown man. And he said he finally wants to look into, okay, so let me find out, like, you want to look into the whole story of Avram in the fire. So he's looking Parshas Lech Lecha, he can't find it there. He's already going. By Era, he's already, okay, Yitzchak, goes back to Noach, he's born, he can't, he's like, where's he? He said he thought the Chumash was a mistake. He said, I think they had left out some, so he went and got another Chumash. He thought it was a printing error. He said he couldn't find it. So he realized that it's not in the Torah, right? It's a medrash. So the medrash is the story of Avram. And it's probably a topic for another time to discuss, but it's interesting is that you have this sometimes where the medrash by Avram perhaps draws on a lot of the details there from the recorded story in Tanakh of someone in fire. And who is that? Kanan Mishal Azariah. You have this in another case also, the thing about Avram knocking down his father's idols, right? So that whole story, and he puts the thing in his hand, right? And he says, oh, why do you worship him? Oh, well, because he says, oh, the one killed all the others. He says, oh, that's ridiculous. He says, it's ridiculous. They can't breathe. Well, why do you believe in them, right? So that story also, not in the Torah, it's in Medrash. And that also has a Tanakh parallel, right? In Sefer Shoftim, by the story of Gidon, it has a similar story. So there seems to be some, it's interesting how to see how Chazal maybe took from those stories. It wasn't like they made up out of thin air, but the story of Avram is a medrash. They're drawing perhaps from the existing story here. So now that we have that parallel. Oh, good. No, okay, good. So Rab is saying, so maybe he's Avram the fourth person. So let's take, so the Gemara says, I'll read from the Gemara in Pesachim, and then we'll take a look at the sheet. So the Gemara says, when Nimrod throws Avram into the fire, Gavriel, who is called the Malach Shel Eish. Okay, Gavriel is the Malach HaEish. Whatever that means, beyond my pay grade, I don't know. So he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says to Hashem, I'm going to go down and I will cool off the fire and save Avram. So Hashem says, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ani Yachid Ba'olami. I am unique in my world, and Avraham is unique in his world, meaning he has set himself aside from the rest of the world. So Hashem says, it is appropriate that the Yachid should save the Yachid. So Hashem says to Gavriel, I will go save Avram from the Kivshan by Nimrod and not you. Okay. So then Hashem says to him, however, because your desire to help here, he says, I'm not going to let this go by, and I'm not going to forget about this, Gavriel. So what happens? Now to our story. So in Dalet, on the sheets. When Nebuchadnezzar throws them into the fire, Amad Yorkamu, Sar Habarad. So a less well-known Malach, right? The angel of hail, Yorkamu, says to Hashem, Amar Lefanav, Ribona Shalom, Ereid Va'atzanenes HaKivshan. I will go cool off the fire. Va'atzilat tzadikim halalu mikivshan heish, and I'll save them. Amar lo Gavriel. So Gavriel says the following claim to Hashem: Ein givuraso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'kach. This will not demonstrate your greatness. Sha'ata sar barad. You, Yorkamu, are the angel of hail. V'hakol yodin shamayim mechaben esaish. Everyone knows that water can put out fire. So they're just going to attribute this not to a great miracle, but just they're going to write it off as some natural cause. Ela ani sar shel eish ered ve'akara mibifnim. I will go down. I am the sar shel eish, and still I will cool it off. Ve'aktiach mibachutz, but it will be blazing hot outside. Ve'esanes besochnes, and there will be that miracle. So the Gemara seems it doesn't say it outright, but who's the fourth one? The Malach, right? It's the Malach Gavriel, and this is the background for that story. It's the Malach Gavriel. Okay. So getting back to our issue, which we'll spend the last few minutes on here. So we have one approach, which is Rabbeinu Tam, that this statue is not avodah zarah, and the reason they're not bowing down is because they want to be Mekadosh Shemaim. They want to go the extra mile, and the Rambam seems to say that no, they're not going the extra mile. They're not going the extra mile. They are doing what's required of them because this is a Shas Hashmad. Maybe it's not avodah zarah, but this is a Shas Hashmad, and that's what they're doing, and it is required of them. Depending on that answer is going to determine how you view the rest of the Jews at that time period, what they did. Now, there is another approach to this, and it's in Beis. Tosfos in Pesachim, in source Beis, is the bottom line, is the Ri. And the Ri is a different opinion here. And the Ri says that this was avodah zarah. Indeed, it was avodah zarah. So he says it's clear. That's why they didn't bow down, because of avodah zarah. So the Ri asks, why is it that the Gemara pins their bowing down or not bowing down to the frogs? There's nothing to do with the frogs. It's clear why they didn't bow. They didn't bow down because it was real hardcore avodah zarah. So he says, Ma ra'u shelo barchu. Why didn't they flee? Shahari kodem hamasa hayu yicholim livroach, kamo sha'asa Daniel. So Tosfos says Daniel avoided the issue. When they heard that this was the rule being made, so they said, oh, there's going to be a ceremony and everyone has to bow. If you don't bow, you're dead. So Daniel said, forget it. I'm not showing up to the ceremony. I'm out of here. So Tosfos says, why didn't they do that? They could have avoided the issue. Why would you allow yourself to be put in a situation that you have to give up your life for? So Tosfos says that is what they said. Wow, well, that will be a Kiddush Shem Shemayim. So it's a different type of Kiddush Shem Shemayim, right? One answer in Tosfos, the one approach is the Kiddush Shem Shemayim is I don't have to do this, but I'm going to give up my life anyway. Here, it's I'm going to put myself in a position where I will have to give up my life. And then I'm going to have no choice. So instead of, taking a day off and going on vacation, I'm going to show up to the ceremony and I'm going to make a point, say I'm not doing it because it's an idol. And then they have to give up their life for that. Okay. If it's not avodah zarah, are you allowed to choose to do that? Okay, good. So Ariel's asking, are you allowed to make that decision and say I'm willing to? Sorry, are you allowed to? Wait, I jumped to conclusions. What are you specifically asking? If it's not avodah zarah, are you allowed to do what? Because they're holding a gun to my head and saying eat pig. Okay, so good. So this is a machlokes between Rambam and Tosfos. Tosfos not here, but it does follow along some of what Tosfos is saying here. It kind of meshes with it. Tosfos feels that if a person wants to choose to give up their life for something that they feel, they say, eat the pig or we'll kill you, and it's not a shas hashmad and it's not in front of 10 people, the person says, I'm going to do it. Tosfos says a person may choose to do that, right? He says, v'chai bohem means we must live by the mitzvos. So Tosfos says that is almost like a permit, right? It's a permit that I may choose to violate an avera in order to save my life. But if I choose to give up my life, that's my decision. The Rambam believes that that's not a choice that can be made. It's in that Rambam. It's not on the sheet. But if you want to look there afterwards, that's part of that Rambam that I quoted. The Rambam there says that it is usher to. Unless you are being called by the Torah to dictate when you give up your life, you may not choose to do that. So if you want to see, the Shulchan Aruch does deal with how to paskin like Rambam and Tosfos. It should never come up, but you can look in your there, Siman Kuf Nun Zayin. Shulchan Aruch talks about that. Okay, so let's take a look at one more interesting Tosfos and then wrap it up. We're going to hold off on that one, actually. I'll say this one outside. So there's an interesting Gemara. the Gemara says in Megillah, in Daf Yud Beis, the Gemara says that the Talmidim of, I think Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai or Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I don't remember which one, asked him, they said, what did the Jews do in the times of Achashverosh to warrant such a terrible decree? So many of us are familiar with this Gemara. The Gemara that says maybe they went to the Suda. There's lots of different answers given. So one of the answers given there is, it says, because prior to this event of Purim, the Jews bowed down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. That's what it says. So, okay. Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, so you asked a great question, which is okay, but that's not them. This is like old news. So how does that work out? So that's a good question. The next part may answer. It doesn't deal with this Tzvi's question directly, but it may answer that. So the Gemara asks a follow-up question. The Gemara says, okay, fine. Well then, why were they saved? Meaning, it didn't come to fruition in the times of Purim. You're telling me that they did something wrong. So either way, if they did something wrong, so then that should have been it in Purim. And it wasn't. So how do you resolve that? So the Gemara says something interesting. It says they only bowed to it, and it says a cryptic word. It says they only did it lifnim, panim, the face. So what does that mean? So Rabbeinu Tam again appears on the scene, and he says lifnim means again they bowed to it like it appeared. Like I think it means on the face of things. I don't know for sure what that's. I think that's what he means. He says, because like we've been saying, it wasn't really Avodah Zarah. It was a statue. It was a statue. So they did something that they gave, they attributed power to this, and kavod to this thing, but it wasn't really Avodah Zarah. And because of that, he says, so that's why Hashem, so to speak, threatened them with the threat of destruction. But they didn't really do something wrong, so therefore they weren't destroyed. Now that kind of answers your question, but it doesn't ask it from your point of view. You still have a good question, which is, well, but that's not like, why should they be punished for their ancestors? Ultimately, and they weren't, but for a different reason. He's saying because they didn't really do anything wrong. What do you say? Okay, good. So that I think would be, yeah, the Gemara doesn't go down that road, but I think it's a valid point. That's what I would have, looking at the story of Purim in a vacuum without anything else, I think that's how we would approach it. We would say, well, there must have been some kind of tshuva that they themselves merited to be saved. The other opinion there says something interesting. Says what it means when they bowed down, lifnim, on the surface. So it says, no, it was a real Avodah Zarah. It was a real Avodah Zarah. Again, like the other opinion says, it was real Avodah Zarah. But when they bowed down, it was on the face, meaning they weren't bowing down to actually give it, to accept it as a god, as a deity. They were just bowing down, but in their hearts they're thinking, this is dumb, this is dumb, this is dumb. Right? It's lifnim. It just looks like they're accepting it, but they're bowing physically, but they're not actually internalizing that. And it was on that then that Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah say, we're not doing that. We could bow and just say that we don't accept it, but we're not doing that. Okay. The tzitz? I do not know. Oh, is that what you're referring to? Where they? Yeah. Okay, that would make sense. Yeah. I don't. I think that. Okay, so to close here, again with Ariel's question from last week about why is the story here. So Tess, the Barbanel says a nice idea. The Barbanel says, he says again at the end of the parak, like what? So why do we need this? He concludes, this story is relevant for the nation of Klal Yisrael in their galus, and for the decrees and the terrible persecution which is done to them, and for these very bitter types of circumstances that we find ourselves in, kitanur ha'esh hasoref, like this fiery burning furnace that they were in, we feel that. And that what? Shelo yamush malach Hashem mehem, that the angel of God never leaves us, just like it didn't leave them. V'hashgachaso ha'elyona lo ya'azvim, and God's divine providence, hashgacha, on us, just like it was on Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, does not leave the Jews in our in our galus, just as they were in their galus. Did not leave them and protected them there. So anyway, I put a chart on the back of the three main Gemaras. We did two of them. The third one we did not do. But again, they all kind of spin on this point of, was this a statue or was it really Avodah Zarah? And again, the issues that come out of there are essentially, can a person volunteer to give themselves up, give their life up for something if they're not really called upon? Is that acceptable or not? It also gets into the question of, like we just said now, about bowing down but not really accepting and internalizing it. Is that acceptable or not? And we'll pick up with Perek Daled and last parak of Daniel next of Nebuchadnezzar. He'll be off stage after next week. I wish you all good chance.